Class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. This is kind of one of those days where you know, if you've been a parent, you go, the strangest things comes out of your kids' mouths. I gotta wonder what the parents of Kayleigh McEnany think when she opens her mouth. I gotta wonder if the advanced education and all of the time, energy, money, all the things they put in to getting her to the place where she's at. If when she speaks, do they cringe? It's just one of those things, because she had the audacity today to say, well, science should not stand in the way of reopening schools. It should just be a dartboard. Maybe we could throw darts at a dartboard, and that's how we decide if we're going to open the schools for our kids. Maybe we just, here's a better idea. We take all the kids' names and we put them in little cards. We throw them against the stairs, and whichever ones land on the odd step, they get to come to school. The ones who on the even, they don't. I mean, it's really just crazy. But, this is the current state of the Republican Party, just plain crazy. In fact, today, Mike Pompeo, again, another one of these moments where you go, do they think about what they say? He was giving a speech. Evidently, he was in Philadelphia giving a speech on this report that he commissioned. He wanted to have put out. It's a report produced by the Commission on Unalienable Rights. And it was, the idea was to look at our human rights policies and, to give ideas on, how we pursue ensuring that the rest of the world values human rights. Because according to him, we've lost our bearing. He believes that. And he went into this spiel about how he believes that property rights and religious freedom, those are first and foremost. Those are the most important. Property rights and religious freedom. And you stop and you think about that. That really is the crux of the prosperity gospel GOP. It really is. He went on to say Americans have not only unalienable rights, but also positive rights granted to them by governments, courts, and multilateral bodies. Many are worth defending in light of our founding. Others aren't. And, it got me thinking about unalienable rights, the word that just kind of jumps at you, that you have all the rights. The only rights that you give up are the ones that are specifically passed into legislation. So everything is your right until we take them away. And, hearing him talk about it, because understand, he wants to protect property because, rich people want to make sure that they do that. And, the whole religion thing, because, well, they need that to keep people in line. What he really wanted to say is, well, we want to make sure that we get to continue to bash the queers and, make sure that women are barefoot and pregnant and all that stuff. He wanted to say that. He just didn't. And his report actually said that, while it didn't make any real policy, predictions or any policy goals or any of that stuff, it did say that abortion and same-sex marriage are not rights. That they are divisive social and political controversies. So, the right of people to be who they are and do what they do within the confines of their four walls, it's divisive. It's political controversy. It's kind of amazing. And it's kind of amazing that our tax dollars funded the group that did this report. It's just amazing. And it gets worse. I mean, look, it's a report, a couple of words, that doesn't bother me. It's really the insanity of the actions. And I look at the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who, has kind of, said we should wear the masks. Maybe we should. There's no mandate. Maybe you might want to. But in the process of maybe you might want to, and this is the thing that really gets me about Republicans, because they talk about, getting government out of our lives, smaller, less intrusive government. They talk about end of big government. They want government local. They want, all kinds of local control. Yet every time they get the power of the state or the federal government, they ensure that, well, they get to tell all of us what to do. So Brian Kemp, in true Republican fashion, has banned cities and counties in Georgia from mandating masks or any face coverings or any of that stuff, or mandating any social. They can do nothing. They have to, leave it up to the discretion of the individual. And here's the sad reality. The sad reality is half of us are crazy. And half of us are going to make the other half of us sick. And the thing is I could probably go on about this for days and weeks and months, and you wonder how these people get elected. You wonder how these folks get into positions of power. And it comes down to, who can vote and who can't. And I've been saying that for years. The sad reality is Republicans have done a much, much, much better job. Now, Democrats used to be really good at rigging the ballots, way, way back. Republicans have been much smarter about it. You go back to Paul Waywork back in 1980, if I don't want everybody to vote, we religious people, our power goes up as the voting populace goes down. We don't want everyone voting. We just want us voting. And from that point, forward, they have done everything they can do to, gridlock, to put obstacles in the way, and to deny people their ability to vote. Here in 2012, they rammed through the Voter Suppression Act that, clearly was about getting Mitt Romney elected. In fact, Mike Turzai, the Speaker of the House, I think he's out the door by now, the former Speaker of the House, he was very clear, voter ID to get Mitt Romney elected as president. Done. We now see that Florida, and thank goodness for the Supreme Court, because Florida, they had a referendum. They had a measure that went through the ballot in 2018. The good people of Florida went to the polls and overwhelmingly said that people who were convicted of felonies didn't lose their right to vote forever. That once you paid your penance, once you did the time, you did your crime, now you did the time, you're a free citizen, you are welcome back to the rest of us, and you have your voting rights restored. Well, Ron DeSantis immediately signed into a law that said that felons would only get their voting rights back if they paid all of the restitution, all of the fines, all of the penalties, all of the things that they pile on top. And it just reeked of Jim Crow. I mean, Jim Crow is back, and it's back in a big way. Because what's going to happen is, somebody will be convicted of whatever crime it is, and they will get the maximum monetary penalty. And then when they get out of jail, good luck paying that back. The maximum fines will be put in place so that these folks can't vote. And the Supreme Court said today, that's all right. That is A-OK. And I expect other states may try something similar. Now understand, Florida is, like the voter suppression, voter theft capital of the world. If you go back to 2000, we all remember the hanging chads, but what we don't remember are the 90,000 African Americans who were thrown off the voting rolls because their name may have sounded like somebody who might have committed a crime. And in fact, there was the one guy who he hadn't committed his crime yet. He was going to do that in 7 years, but they knew he was going to do it, and they took his vote away preemptively. You can't make this up. It's there. It's quite remarkable, but they took 90,000 African Americans off the voting roll, and the state was like 400 votes, 435 votes. You think those 90,000 people would have voted for for George W. Bush? Not a chance. But they understood this, and that's the reason that they had Catherine Harris do what she did. Brought in Choice Point. They did a whole bunch of purging based on, well, your name sounds like a felon. And, well, they won. 2004, they tried all kinds of shenanigans. The caging was very popular. They'd send out a little card to your house that kind of looked like junk mail. And when you didn't send it back with your information on it and updating your information, they just threw you off the voting rolls. And if you moved, even better yet, if you moved, they had it sent back to the post office with a do not forward, or they sent it back to the post office and didn't pick it up. And that's where the caging comes from, because there were thousands of these things sitting that the voters didn't even know it had happened, and they got their votes stolen too. And this is just part of the gimmick, part of the game. And people are like, well, Donald Trump can't win. If they steal enough votes, he can. If we kill enough people off, especially older people and especially minorities, since the virus seems to be targeting them, if we kill enough of them off, maybe. You kind of got to wonder So there's lots to get to, lots to talk about today. I'm still stunned by McEnany's statement. Don't let science get in the way. I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the only one who is so freaked out by a spokesperson of our government who is so. The words flowed out of her mouth and not a thought of what she said crossed her mind. It was really frightening for me, because you send kids to education, to school to get an education, to think. You send them to learn science. You send them to learn math. You send them to become critical thinking adults, citizens, who are able to take this wonderful thing that we've been given, this idea of self-governance, this idea that collectively we can solve problems that individually we cannot, in a framework of our government, and you have the most inept people possible running our government and really ultimately destroying this wonderful thing that we've been given. We didn't fight for this. We didn't fight for the right of governance. We didn't fight for any of this. It was handed down, and they are destroying it. Sad stuff. Got lots to get to today. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend David Yankovic is going to be here to share some thoughts of the news of the day. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day fatalities on Bloody Thursday touched off a 4-day general strike in San Francisco. It was the first time a general strike had shut down a major U.S. port city. The strike had been raging since May. Workers battled with police days earlier as the shipping bosses tried to force open the docks that saw 2 workers killed. More than 40,000 poured into Market Street to march silently in their funeral procession. Outrage fueled plans for a general strike. 21 unions across the city voted to walk. In his book Strike, Jeremy Brecker notes the momentum for a general strike was unstoppable, despite attempts by AFL leaders to prevent it. By 8 a.m. on this day, the San Francisco general strike had begun. Over 150,000 workers, including Teamsters and butchers, restaurant and transit workers, joined longshoremen and seafarers in shutting down the ports, the city, and the highways. But as Brecker points out, the strike was met with a powerful counterattack. Hundreds of special deputies were sworn in. The National Guard was called out, complete with infantry, machine guns, tanks, and artillery units. State officials were poised on the edge of declaring martial law. Vigilante raids began on the 17th with assaults on the Marine Workers Industrial Union and the offices of the Western Worker newspaper and strike bulletin. Many other gathering places and homes where workers regularly met were also busted up. Hundreds were rounded up, beaten, and arrested. The city's Central Labor Committee authorized exceptions that eroded the strike's power. In the face of the violent raids and opposition from AFL leaders, the General Strike Committee voted to end the strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So in the saga that has been the Republican National Convention, you may remember they moved from North Carolina because they wanted to have their big shindig in person without masks and without any of that crummy social distancing and all that stuff on our hands. They wanted a good old-fashioned, shoulder-to-shoulder, screaming and spittling all over each other convention. And when the governor of North Carolina said, no, not going to happen, they thought, Jacksonville, Florida, they're crazy. The governor there's mindless. Let's go there. Except the mayor of Jacksonville says, nope, got to have masks. Then they decide, hey, let's go outside. You know, a bunch of old, rich white guys sitting out in the August heat. Yeah. Well, now today the RNC is saying that they're going to scale back. They're going to scale back the convention. They're thinking about roughly, but maybe 2,500 people, not the 7,000 that they were planning on. And I got to tell you, I think that number is going to dwindle because a lot of rich old white guys are not going to want to sit outside in the heat. And outside of that, they're probably not going to want to get into Florida at all, because they're probably not going to want to get sick and die. Just a thought. So, hey, maybe this is a sign that the GOP can learn. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big news of the day, also the conventions. I've asked our good friend David Yankovic to come talk with us. He's a fantastic digital strategist, one of my key go-to guys in that world. David, thanks for taking time for us. Okay, did I lose him? You there, David? No, I guess not. Is he? Okay, I don't hear him. Speak or be spoken to.
I'm here.
Hey, there you are.
I don't know what's going on. I got full bars.
Yeah, you're way down there. That's why nobody can hear you. So, what do you think of this convention? What do you think of the fact that the RNC is now saying, man, we're going to scale it down? Yeah, this ain't happening. Try and call him back. This evidently is it's just one of those things. I don't know what. Anytime you deal with the phone lines, always trouble. Always trouble. But here's the thing. The Democrats are saying that to their delegates, maybe you stay home. Don't show up. Don't come. Stay home. Stay safe. And this is what leadership is about. Trump needs to have that. He needs to have that kind of, well, the adulation, the a bunch of people kissing his behind. He absolutely has. He craves that. And honestly, I don't know that the convention is going to help him. But it is kind of interesting to me that he's just losing his mind. And this is another one of those things that, he needs that they're really going to take away from him. And it's been his decisions that have caused this scenario where he's just not going to be able to go to Florida. So anyway, let's see if we got David back. How are you, David?
Hey, can you hear me?
There you go. So what do you think of this? What do you think about the conventions and the fact that the RNC's talking about scaling theirs down to 2,500 from the 7,000 they had wanted? Yeah, he disappeared again. You remember Art Bell? Art Bell was he was one of those. He was the midnight guy for years. He was the guy who, it was great listening overnight because he always had the most eclectic guests. He always had, crazy people on. They were talking about spaceships and aliens and all kinds of stuff. And he left radio. Just all of a sudden said, "Screw it. I'm leaving. They're just done." All because of cell phones. Cell phones used to do, because this is the kind of stuff you end up dealing with because they're so, well, they're so sometimes worthless, and they're not reliable. And have you ever? And I hate when this happens, when someone's bubbling like crazy and just you can't hear a word that they say. So let's give it one more try and see where this takes us. David, are you there? Not there.
I'm here.
Okay, there we go. All right. So what do you think? Let's try this one last time. What do you think of the RNC scaling down their convention?
I don't know, they're garbage. I mean, 4 years of this. 4 years they haven't done anything at all for anything. They haven't listened to medical advice. They haven't done anything right in any of this stuff. And now they're doing it because it's the convention and it's them, and they're afraid that, turnout's going to be low or come on. I mean, the reason why they're pulling this back is not because they give any crap at all about attendance. They're coronavirus or safety. They're scaling this back because people don't want to go.
Yep. And it's smart on them for not wanting to go. Look, we've already decided we're not sending our kids back to school no matter what in the fall until we find out that things are safe. And, if you're an old white guy, the last place you should be is in Florida.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, too, I've seen polling a lot in the last couple months, really, where that tide has been changing for the Republican Party. They are having a lot of trouble with the old, reliable voters that show up, over 65 and, are ready to, vote every single election, primary, city, state, everything. They're really worried about coronavirus, and they're really starting to abandon ship a little bit on Trump. And we're starting to see those numbers kind of dwindle. Trump isn't building a coalition. He's losing one.
No, and especially when you look at Florida's, things are just every day there's more bad news, and it's only getting worse. And, to have Trump go there and do this only highlights the fact that he's such a failure. I mean, if you remember the Tulsa rally, everyone was saying, hey, you shouldn't have the Tulsa rally. It's going to be bad. We now find out that the governor, got coronavirus. I wonder where he got it from. And Herman Cain, you remember the pizza guy?
Oh yeah.
Herman Cain's got the corona, and evidently they're trying a new treatment with him, which generally means, the old stuff ain't working.
Yeah, and here's the thing too about Florida is I think it was earlier today or a couple of days ago maybe. I can't remember anymore because all the days blended into the same during this pandemic. But 1 in 3 children in Florida, and I don't remember what county it was, have coronavirus, and they're carrying it, and a lot of it is symptomless. And so 33% of children have it. So yeah, let's open schools back up. Yeah. Let's get all the kids infected and then send them home to grandma.
Yeah. No, I mean it was actually 4 or 5 of the most populous counties. Dade being one of them, Palm Beach, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was like 4 or 5 of the more populous ones that you go, geez, that is an enormous number. And you're right. Maybe they don't get sick because this is what we keep hearing. Well, the kids are resilient. They can handle it. Yeah, but mom and dad might not be able to. And how bad will it be when we got a bunch of kids who made it through, but their parents died off?
And there's that too, but there's also the long-term ramifications if a child does get it. If they get it and they have symptoms like lung damage, they have breathing problems, I mean, it ravages your body. Like when they say that the cases are no longer there or they're solved, like there's been 3 million cases and we have 2.5 million or whatever it would be that, are good now and they've gotten better. That means that you got out of the hospital and are allowed to go home on a ventilator with a breathing machine for the rest of your life. You might be 29 years old sitting with a breathing machine with you for the rest of your life. I mean, all of this, just what coronavirus does is it feels like it picks the weakness in your body and attacks it. And for kids, that could be devastating. We're starting to see kids get it and that happening now. And this thing keeps also getting new strains and really multiplying in different ways. And I mean, it's really unbelievable how fast this thing changes. So it adapts to everything.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is I don't know if you saw Steve Schmidt today. He was on MSNBC, and he basically just lit into Trump. But the one quote that he had that just resonated with me on a bunch of levels. He said, "We're a national laughing stock. The president's a national laughing stock. When you ponder that the richest and militarily most powerful country in the world, the country with the world's leading research universities, the most advanced math and science country in the world, that we've brought low by conspiracy theories on cable news networks, on talk radio." By internet trolls, by a president who refuses to read and do his homework, refuses to listen to medical experts, who only cares about himself, not the American people, cares only about his reelection. The American people have been gaslighted, lied to. And you go, we are a national laughing stock. The rest of the world seems to be able to figure this out, but we are supposedly the richest, most powerful, and, well, obviously the smartest. But this is tearing us apart.
Oh, it's absolutely tearing us apart. And, John is a really brilliant strategist. I got to give him credit because in the South, they don't want to be embarrassed. That is the worst feeling. In every Southern state, like that is, because there's always the jokes and there's everybody kind of pointing fingers at them, and making derogatory comments about it. So, and of course, too, all their politicians are ridiculous. Almost all their politicians, I should say, are ridiculous. We have some good ones in the South too, but so Steve knowing that is, first off, it's true. We are the laughing stock of the world, and that makes it more powerful. But he also knows what everybody else knows, which is that the South does not like to be embarrassed, and that is how we're going to win the South in this election, because that's the message right there. Boom. We're not going to. Aren't you tired of being embarrassed by this guy? Like, come on. Really?
No, and I'm hoping that it filters down to not just this guy, but all of the people who have been his apologists. And for me, that means you got to take the Senate. That means all of those Republicans who sat by and did nothing during the impeachment, that we now find out, thanks to John Bolton's book, and Where the Hell Was He When It Mattered, that everything was true. Every bit of it was true, and then some. In fact, as Bolton said here on the program, it's malpractice. It's impeachment malpractice that they didn't impeach him for more things. And yet you had all of these senators who stood by idly and did nothing.
Oh, it's even worse than that. It's, they stood by and did nothing, but they're a part of it. There's no question that a lot of the senators who are out there, even in the House, if you look at the House Minority Leader, he said in 2015, I'm pretty sure that Russia is paying Trump, or Putin's paying Trump. Now he's King Mr. Trump. I love this guy, and wrapped his arms around him. He's worse than Speaker Ryan was. Honestly, maybe I should have went and challenged him when I ran, but it's unbelievable. And that's what we're facing. And the thing is you're exactly right. And that's why I keep tweeting about, too, and I keep telling everybody, keep your eye on this election. Don't listen to the polls. Get through this. But then after this, we got a lot of politicians that weed out of the government who are basically Trump apologists, or even worse, and in sync with them on all this stuff.
No, this is the moment where I really think the Republican Party has to cease to exist. Maybe there's something else, but they're at this point they're a death cult.
Yeah, I thought the same thing in 2016. The first time I ever came on your show, I wrote an article called "Is This the End of the GOP?" that went very viral, and you let me on my first interview, and that wasn't true. Donald Trump won. We got a government full of justices and people on the courts and everything else that are radically right wing. We did not win that election. And I thought it was the end for the GOP going into that election because they were so racist, they were so extreme. But it wasn't. And so I'm not counting this time. I'm not counting them out. But on the other side of this, it's up to all of us to make it happen. We have to get out there, register voters, and we can't stop. 2020 passes, we got to get ready for 2022
right.
and 2024. And I know that we've been doing this a really long time, but this is our lives, and if we give them an inch, they're going to kill us.
No, you're absolutely right. But here's the thing. You hit on it. If we still don't know what's going to happen this November, I'm looking at this Supreme Court decision in Florida that basically put Jim Crow back in play, and a way to steal the Florida election. And we have no idea what other games they're up to. I fear that, with enough of this shenanigans, maybe we do get Trump for another 4 years. And as Steve Schmidt said, life as you know it will never go back to the way it was if he wins 4 more years. And I agree with him.
I don't agree with him at all. I think if Trump wins, it's the end of the freaking republic. I really do. I can't see him in 4 years in this country. What he's done in 4 years already, if he gets another 4 more years, I don't think this country constitutionally is going to break. It's a criminal enterprise. They're doing a smash and grab every day. Every time we see anything, it's ridiculous. Just like pardoning Stone, like all of this stuff that he's doing, and no rule of law matters anymore at all. Like, they have killed the justice system already. Like, that's done right now. Like, and you can argue with me all you want to about that. Yeah, I'll get arrested if I do something. But if Trump and his people around him do anything, you can just pardon them and commute their sentences and do whatever. And he can, and that's the problem here. And so the justice system doesn't work. It's not fair. And it's disappropriate anyway, or disproportionate, because what's happening with Black Lives Matter, in the black communities throughout this country. So, I don't agree. I think that's the end of the republic, because I cannot see us sustaining constitutionally, not even about everything else, just constitutionally, I don't think we can sustain another 4 years of what he's doing.
No, I think that's what he was saying. He was saying that, there's no going back to the way things were if he's reelected. There's, he was very clear, like you. He didn't take it as far as you did, and I agree with you. But he was saying, no, this is going to be bad. We can't reelect this guy, which is, my fear is that people go, well, we can't. We're going to anyway.
Yeah. Here's the thing, though. This is my hope. Last election, he won with, 25% of the vote total, and Hillary had about 25.2% of the vote. Only half, of that. It wasn't. It was basically Trump won with 1/4 of registered voters. Now, if everybody shows up in this election,
right,
we'll have a freaking landslide. So let's all show up. Like, vote no matter what. I'm going to stand in line if I have to, even if I get COVID to vote this guy out.
I'm going to just mail my ballot in. Thanks very much. I'm not going to get sick, but I will make sure my ballot gets in there. And that's why he's here in Pennsylvania suing the governor here in Pennsylvania, because the governor put boxes out in front of the election office that you could drop your ballot off and didn't have to mail it.
Yeah, why would we want to make voting easier when we can gerrymander and suppress the vote so that corruption can win again?
Yeah, it's really just insane. But here's the thing: while we're talking about all of this stuff, there's so much going on. I don't know if you saw the story today that us, the U.S., the U.K., and Canada is accusing Russia of attempting to steal our coronavirus research. They're basically hacking us all the time. And, this is just another one of those little attacks where, we just don't seem to ever respond.
We never respond, ever. We have bounties on our troops. That's not even a news story. They're talking about beans at the Oval Office. Literally, we have anchors on the evening news and in the national news complaining about the president with beans. And you know why he did that? So no one would talk about Russian bounties on American troops. And no one would talk about Russia interfering with COVID information and what's going on there with us in the UK. But Trump knows what he's doing. He's a master media manipulator. He said it when he ran for office. He said no one manipulates the media better than I do. And that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And exactly today with all of that breaking, that's not even the worst thing they're doing. There's bounties on American troops right now, and the president of the United States believes Putin or whatever's happening there, and there is no oversight. There's no nothing. We can't say anything about it, and our media isn't even covering it.
No, and the thing is, because I've had a bunch of people say, "No, that's not true." So and so said it's not true. I'm going, even let's argue it might not even be true. Even the suggestion would make you delve into this like no other. And I don't buy any of his statement that he didn't know. Because when I asked John Bolton point blank, I said, did you march that into his office? And did you tell him? He said, well, I can't tell you national security things, but Susan Rice wrote an op-ed that said that she would have marched right in there if it were her. And he said, I agree with her. So for me, that's pretty much saying, yeah, I told him, he just wasn't listening or didn't care.
And you know what, though? It also doesn't matter because it was in a presidential daily briefing.
Yeah, we got a guy who doesn't.
You have to read it. President Bush, he didn't read the presidential daily briefing, and 9/11 happened. Trump, and it doesn't matter. I'm not giving you a pass on that because you didn't read the briefing. You don't get extra credit. Like, this isn't school where you can be like, sorry, I didn't know I had an assignment. Like, people are dying, and that's the problem here. And on all of it with Trump and what he's doing, like, this used to matter. Soldiers used to matter so much to everybody, especially the Republicans. Like, that's the reason why, like, initially, for me, when I joined the military when I was younger and, everything else there, that I appreciated the Republicans so much because, when you're in there, you see them all the time more. And now, I mean, look, John McCain, what he's doing to troops, there's, immigrants here who have been working for our country and Bronze Stars and heroism, and they're deporting them. Like, they don't care about the troops. Like, Trump does not care. And also, none of the Republicans care. And we know that now because they wouldn't be doing the crap that they're doing if they did.
No, you're absolutely right. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, had a little Twitter snafu the other day. Evidently, a bunch of rich and powerful people got their accounts hacked. Not sure how that happens all at once. Any thoughts?
I have no idea how that happened, but I know that Twitter is garbage. I know that I use Twitter and I'm there, but the way that they handle security is terrible. Everything. And it's easy to get hacked. It's easy to, there really isn't a mainframe to do that. And if you have a problem, have you ever tried to report somebody?
No.
You can report somebody 6,000 times. You're not going to get anywhere. I think Twitter has like a staff of like 50 people or something because there's nothing. It's all automated. So, I mean, what happened the other night, I can't say anything because I don't know. But my guess on this would be maybe that's not, the Bitcoin hackers. Maybe that's Russia's first attempt to shut down this stuff. I don't know. And, we've seen this before, though, and it's always Democrats. It's never Republicans. You ever notice that? And, last night, it was the celebrities and it was Joe Biden's accounts and it was that stuff, but no Republicans got hit. I don't know what's going on. I really don't, but, Jack Dorsey and Twitter and the way that they operate and do everything, it's just, it's unbelievably terrible. And they have no care to make it better. Just like with the white supremacists on Twitter. There's, Nazis everywhere. There's anti-Semitism. There's nastiness. There's hatred. There's foulness. And Twitter does nothing because they can't. They'd have to get rid of 80% of the Republican Party officials if they wanted to get rid of the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists and the KKK on the online there. And that's my problem with Twitter. They aren't consistent. They don't do this stuff right. And now it's costing us. There's still people who are locked out of their accounts.
Yeah, it's nuts. And because for a moment I thought I was one of them because I couldn't tweet anything for hours yesterday. And, it was just going, uh-oh, here's trouble.
Yeah, that was the same for me. I'm like, oh, this is really bad.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was going to be able to get on or what happened. And, and that's the problem, too. The lack of communication. They posted a thread. That's all they did.
Yeah.
There's no, like, push notification, like, hey, sorry that this happened. We're fixing this. And they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to, send emails or text messages or whatever. They chose not to. They put up a thread, so most people didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah, it's crazy. But, David, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Anytime.
Talk soon.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1862. That was the day that black rights activist Ida B. Wells Barnett was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi. She was the oldest of 8 children. Wells went to college and then became a teacher in Memphis, Tennessee. While in Memphis, Ida B. Wells became active in speaking out against black oppression in the Jim Crow South. She was the editor of a black newspaper, the Free Speech and Headlight. She wrote about many of the issues that faced the black community, including violence, unequal education facilities, and voter suppression. Taking such a public stand could have disastrous repercussions. She wrote under the pseudonym Iola, but she was fired from her job for writing about the inequities of the segregated Southern education system. Tom Moss, a successful black store owner and friend of Ida B. Wells, was lynched by a white mob. 2 other black men were also lynched for helping him to try and defend his store. Black Southern business owners were seen as potential economic competition and were often the targets of threats, violence, and lynching. Angered by the murders, Ida B. Wells began to research the lynchings. She published the findings of her investigation in her newspaper. Furious white residents destroyed and burned her newspaper office. In danger for her life, Wells left Memphis. Ida moved to Chicago, where she continued her anti-lynching work, documenting how the heinous act happened not only in the South. She helped to found the NAACP. At the first NAACP conference in Atlanta in 1909, Wells spoke, saying, quote, "Time was when lynching appeared to be sectional, but now it is national. A blight upon our nation, mocking our laws, and disgracing our Christianity." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I came across some interesting numbers. And again, we've been talking about for a while that next month is going to be a really bad month because while the $600 that was extra on top of the unemployment is going to dry up, which means people are going to lose more than half of their income, all those people who have lost their jobs, and the making sure that you don't get thrown out of your house ends as well. And I saw these numbers that 19.3% of renters with kids say that they can't pay next month's rent. And when you look at the next line of numbers, the people who are, well, I might be able to, that number jumps up to almost 45% of people who can't or aren't quite sure that they're going to be able to make next month's rent, which is really, really, really scary because we're talking millions of people. And, so far I've seen nothing coming out of Washington to help address that. And here to share some thoughts on, just where we are as an economy and just where we need to be going. I've asked Benga Edgelari to come talk with us. Benga is a senior economist there at the Center for American Progress. Benga, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me on again.
So, are these numbers accurate that I'm looking at?
Well, they are accurate because we're looking at surveying what people are feeling and what people are facing. And that's the biggest thing, is that we don't have a really good sense on what people are facing. Because, again, this is a huge public health crisis that we're on our 5th month of dealing with, and we're actually going in the wrong direction. So people are very much concerned about what's happening with their finances.
Yeah, because I look at this and I go, we're almost there. We were almost doing okay. And then, all of our Republican governors in the South decided, no, we're going to blow it all up again. And virtually everything that we've done to this point is out the window. And yet we're, here in Pennsylvania, we're going backwards again. They're shutting things down. They're, issuing new mandates, not good.
No, it's not good. And it's very scary because we're talking about health. It's one thing, like if you think about the Great Recession, it was tough because it was a housing and people were losing their housing. But what we're talking about this year in 2020 are people dying, people getting COVID, people spreading COVID. And it's just going, the virus doesn't know any boundaries. They don't know borders. They don't know race, gender, or age. And so this is about people's health, and we're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and the sad reality is the people, it's the most vulnerable. And again, as I was looking at these numbers, my mind immediately went back to Mitt Romney back in 2012, joking about the 47% to his donor class buddies and how they don't pay federal taxes and you know, on and on. And you go, these are the same 47% of the population who are right now struggling the most, and the ones who are probably going to be, if things continue, probably homeless or you know, deeper in poverty, if that's even possible.
Oh, it definitely is. And it's just it's very scary because what ends up happening is that once they are getting harmed, then it spreads. And then it spreads to the middle class. And then it spreads further. And then it just really hits every single aspect of our economy. This is not something where you can just like, well, we can ignore it and it's just going to hit poor people and it's going to end there.
Right.
It's already spreading throughout. And that's why we have double-digit unemployment. That's why we have these huge deficits and debts. And that's why we have this huge problem, because if we don't do something about it, the public health crisis, the fiscal crisis, the economic crisis, it's just going to get worse and worse, and it's going to have decline in our whole economy.
So let me ask you, because you know we're at this moment where I see us going backwards, and I see potentially, if we're smart, another possible lockdown, shutdown, quarantine, however you want to put it. You know, how do we respond to this? Because look, you know, people their savings is gone. That extra $600 that's going to dry up here at the end of the month was a godsend for the working class of this country, and thank goodness the Democrats in the House pushed for that. But once that dries up, you know, I fear August is a really bad month, and September is going to be even worse.
The sad thing is we know exactly what we need to do. We did it in March and April, where we passed the CARES Act. There was the FFCRA. There was Paycheck Protection Program, where, you know, we put money to small businesses. We put money to households. We had those $1,200 checks, which is shown to help people with their expenditures, which then had positive impacts for small businesses. We had the expanded unemployment insurance that you're talking about, the $600. And we've seen that if we continue that and we actually do more of that, so instead of just a one-time check of $1,200, there was a HEROES Act that the House passed like a month ago, or like 5 weeks ago, that has $1,500. Make that recurring. You extend unemployment insurance. And then most importantly, once we do all that to keep people so that they can pay their rent, that they don't have to worry about their finances, then we put in a test and tracing scheme where we could actually make sure we could put a handle on this virus and then figure out, okay, if there, you know, people contracted it, then they have the contact tracing and we have the isolating, and then we see what other countries have done to stem the tide. We do a lockdown for a couple of weeks. We test and trace. We have the things that we know what we need to do.
Right. We
just have to do it and push it and then tackle this.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing, man. I don't know if you're out and about. You know, it seems like we're, you know, I go back to the John Edwards frame quite often of two Americas. You know, the two Americas that he was talking about, with the really, really rich and then the rest of us. But, you know, it's now boiled down to the two Americas being those who believe in science and those who, well, don't. And, you know, and those who wear a mask and do the social distancing and wash their hands and do all of those things to try and keep themselves safe. And then those people who are just, oh, it's all hoax. You know, it's silly. We're not doing it. You know, you hear it all the time. It's nuts. So how do you do those things that we know work and that you've laid out when half of the country's lost their freaking minds?
The sad thing is, this is the thing about the virus, is that it hits everyone. And I saw just today that Chuck Woolery, who has been touting that this is a hoax, this is all this stuff, pulled back because his son contracted the virus. So what's going to happen is, and you see the stories now of people who talk about it being a hoax, contracting the virus, and then dying. And so that's the thing, is you could talk about the hoax you could say it's fake, I'm not going to wear a mask, but it will hit you. And that's the sad thing, is that so many people are dying, so many people are getting the cases, and it doesn't have to be this way. And so the sad thing is that sooner or later, people are going to realize that this is real. And the question is, how many people have to die before we get there?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, we were doing really well. We were on that path that, you know, a little bit longer. Had we locked down even tighter and done as, you know, former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh had said, pay people 90% of their salary to stay the hell home. You know, and how hard is that? make sure that small businesses are able to pay their rent so that they don't get booted out and we don't have another massive corporate property foreclosure and collapse. Spend the money that we need to on the short term so that this isn't going into the fall and into the winter and who knows how long.
Exactly. We don't know how long. And the thing is, what you said, other countries have done that, where they paid, 80%, 90%. They help businesses with their rent and mortgage and utilities. And the thing is, we put a lot of money in, just not in the smart way.
Right.
I mean, we had a $500 billion bailout for the airline industry, and we had, I forgot how much money that went to the Paycheck Protection Program, but there's like $180 billion that hasn't been spent yet. And there's all these places. And one of the biggest problems is that these owners of color, these businesses that are black businesses owned by Hispanics and Latinos, are not getting the money. There's a recent study that just showed that with the Paycheck Protection Program that in New York City, this audit study that they did, no black woman was given a PPP loan.
Well, why is that?
It's because our systems are racist, that we have systemic racism where we create these structures that create these separate outcomes, which not only just harm individuals, it doesn't not only harms black and brown people, but it harms the economy as a whole, because we all do well. We all do well when we help everyone out.
Right.
And so this is the things that we don't do in our policies, that we don't push for in our policies. And we're seeing the effects of that now. And we have all these small businesses closing, all these people losing their jobs. And the thing that I keep going back to is it didn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way.
No, I agree. But, in talking about the PPP loans, because I've had some business owners say, no, it was cake. Rick, you're wrong. It's, this was easy. I filed the paperwork and I got my money and it was the greatest thing ever. And I'm so grateful for it. And good for them. And that's usually my response. Good for you. You're lucky. Or, you just had a really good relationship with your bank. So, is it that simple? That they just had contacts at the bank? Is it because I'm trying to figure out why some people did really well and why so many others that I hear from who are still waiting didn't.
That's the thing, is that this program was so poorly implemented that it's all about the banks. And if you have a good relationship with your bank, chances are this was easy. But the problem was it wasn't easy for everybody. Right. Not everyone got it. And so the thing is, I'm happy that those people got it. I'm happy they did well, but that wasn't true for everybody. And we're seeing the harmful effects of that. Yeah. We're seeing that now these small businesses are closing. A lot of people who were temporarily unemployed is now becoming permanently unemployed, and we're going backwards in all aspects.
Yeah, because I get a lot of small business owners who were self-employed, and their business hasn't come back, and they're saying I was supposed to get this extended money. But it's set up in a way that I don't get anything. So for me, the extended unemployment and the pandemic unemployment insurance that they opened up to allow people who are self-employed and gig employees to be able to collect unemployment, they're not getting it either.
No, they aren't, and that's another problem, is that in the Great Recession, unemployment insurance helped out a lot of people. Studies show that it prevented 5 million people from getting into poverty. Now, what happened was that a lot of the states ran out of money and had to borrow from the federal government. In the 10 years since, instead of trying to increase their trust fund reserves and provide more money in the event of another recession, they made it harder, they made it more restrictive. And in places like Florida, they actually made it so hard that people won't be able to get it. And now that we need it again, it's gotten a lot worse. There's studies showing that only 1 in 6 people were able to get unemployment insurance. And that's why the pandemic unemployment insurance and the pandemic emergency compensation, that's why it was helpful to help fill in those gaps. But now at the end of the month, it's going to expire, and then all those people are going to be left holding the bag again, and it's going to have an adverse impact on our economy.
So is there anything that Congress is doing? Because look, I've been paying attention. I think I've been paying attention. I'm not seeing any sense of urgency whatsoever from Mitch McConnell in the Senate. And look, to be honest, I'm not seeing it coming out of the Democrats either. The fact that, they're still pushing to reopen schools, they're still pushing to reopen things and make things worse. There's still millions of people who are uninsured. In fact, another 5.4 million people added to the uninsured rolls. I think Democrats need to do a much better job, but the Republicans are doing nothing.
Well, they're not even in session right now. They get back in session on Monday, and they're talking about maybe putting together something. And the fact is, it's going to expire July 31st, and it's too late. It's too late right now to do any. I mean, maybe they could do something to extend it, but this should have been done back in June, back in May, to really push it. Some of the things they could have done is tie the relief to economic indicators, so they don't have to keep going back and keep arguing and keep trying to push it. Just say, okay, if unemployment is still above 10%, we do more checks and we keep it going. If it drops down to, say, 5%, then we pull back. We do that so that we don't have to rely on Congress being in session and arguing back and forth and horse trading and all that stuff. But they didn't do that. And so there is no sense of urgency because they don't feel the pain. They are doing all right.
It's crazy. And it's crazy that
that's the thing.
It's crazy that they went home and they without, because I was saying you had this precious little window where you could have created the environment where it's not going to take a month to get the $1,200 check. That it's much quicker, because I know people who waited for well over a month before they got it, and they were at the end of their ability, the end of their lifeline before it came. And you would think that you would figure something out in that time where you go, hey, we got a breather. Let's build some infrastructure so that if it does hit, because everyone was saying there's going to be a second wave. Now, granted, we haven't gotten out of the first one yet, but you would think that you would start building that for, okay, let's plan for the future. And if it doesn't happen, okay, we just plan for something that didn't happen, but we're fortunate that it's there. No?
Yes, you're exactly right. And that's the whole thing, is that you plan for things, and if it doesn't happen, thank God that didn't happen, as opposed to waiting for something to happen, have it be worse, and then have to scramble. Because that's what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks probably. We're going to be scrambling and try to figure things out. The bottom's going to fall out, and we're going to be much worse off. And again, I'm sounding like a broken record, but it didn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Congress and the administration need to pick up and actually pass some stuff, big things, big, bold ideas, more relief, more stimulus, all the above.
No. I just don't see that possible out of this Republican Senate. But, hey, I can always be hopeful. So what's the marching order for folks? Last question I've got for you. What should we be doing? Because I keep saying we need to put pressure on them. You need to be calling, doing all that stuff. But there's part of me goes, it's got to be more.
I think telling stories of saying, hey, I was doing well. The checks happened. The unemployment insurance happened. And this is what it did for me. This is how it helped me out. And now I'm going to be kicked out of my house. Or now I can't, afford to get a job because my kids have no child care or their child care place closed. Tell the stories. Have these stories. Talk about these stories of what's happening. First, of how this stuff helped, the pandemic unemployment insurance, the $1,200 check. Talk about how that helped, how the PPP helped, how you're able to keep your firm, and then what's going to happen once that money goes away. Tell those stories as well as call and email and all that stuff to your senators and representatives. Tell them what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's call them early, call them often. And you're right, share the stories, because, some of the stories I get from people are just absolutely heartbreaking. And, the reality is this pandemic has only magnified all of the things that we've talked about over the years and that I've been talking about on this program for the last 15 years. That our unemployment is pathetic, that we have a system that does not help average everyday working people, and look, evidently we don't help small businesses either. Just sad stuff. But Benga, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the input. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Benga Lorre, he's the senior economist there at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Promise of union recognition. Once the war came to an end, the mill owners pursued anti-union open shop policies and other cost-cutting measures. During the strike, there was near total suppression of all civil liberties. Major work issues included the 12-hour day, the 7-day work week, scores of workers being injured and maimed, union recognition, and poverty wages. Mary Harris, better known as Mother Jones, fought tirelessly throughout her life for social justice and human rights as a labor leader and a worker advocate. On August 20th, while visiting striking miners in Homestead, Pennsylvania, home of U.S. Steel's famous Homestead Steelworks, she defied injunctions against public gatherings and addressed 5,000 striking workers and their families. This speech led to her being arrested and jailed for giving an unauthorized speech. When brought before the judge, she was asked who had signed a permit to speak at a public gathering. She answered, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. As the strike went on, Mother Jones, the grandmother of all agitators, gave many speeches to rally the workers. One speech in Chicago was described by a spy for the U.S. War Department's Military Intelligence Division as the foulest and most profane that can be imagined, teeming with ultra-radical suggestions. Welcoming the spies, she would invite them to the front of the crowd so they could report her words accurately. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Why does Donald Trump refuse to wear a coronavirus mask? Because he realizes that, in a mask, we'd all recognize him as the robber who has been moving furtively behind the scenes of the pandemic to rig the rules against workaday folks to further enrich corporate elites. With media attention riveted on COVID-19 body counts, Trump and company have felt free to monkey-wrench labor laws, dynamite environmental regulations, manipulate the tax code, and generally burglarize our people's commitment to the common good. They're like Robin Hood and his merry band, only in reverse, stealing from the many to give more to the rich few. They've even quietly filched the bulk of the government's multi-trillion-dollar pandemic recovery program, thus dramatically increasing wealth inequality. While you might have received a one-time $1,200 relief check from Washington, major corporations have actually been given the keys to the Federal Reserve's money-printing machine, funneling a long-term giveaway of hundreds of billions of dollars to them. Also, corporate interests are pocketing untold amounts from several little-reported grant programs and tax breaks discreetly created just for them. For example, mysteriously tucked into Trump's first rescue package was a $135 billion tax boondoggle specifically designed for such hucksters as giant real estate developers. Like whom? Well, Trump himself and son-in-law Jared Kushner appear to qualify. Just lucky, I guess. Adding to the peculiarity, this handout had nothing to do with helping America recover economically from the pandemic. Rather, it provides retroactive tax breaks on deals developers cut long before this year's COVID crash. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's Trump and company's version of the old political adage, never let a big crisis go to waste.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're not going to have Chuck Lorre to kick around anymore. No. Chuck had his high moment. Donald Trump retweeted one of his crazy tweets about how, the coronavirus is a lie and it's a big hoax and the Democrats and all kinds of just nuts ramblings. Only today to find out that, his son has been diagnosed with the coronavirus. And oops, I guess he didn't want to stay on the Twitters to take the obvious shellacking that he was going to take. So I guess he deleted his account. And good. All I have to say is good. Bye. There you go. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day, our good friend Sarah Burris, in my view, one of the most important reporters in the country, and the work she does over at Raw Story is fantastic. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
You are the sweetest person ever. Thank you.
No, I love the stuff that you do. So what do you think about Chuck Woolery bailing on the Twitters?
Bye, Felicia. I was so, it's like, it was kind of like Kevin Stitt getting COVID. The governor of Oklahoma got COVID. And so it was kind of like that, where it's just like, oh, karma.
And Herman Cain. Let's not forget the 999 Pizza Man. got it at the
Yeah.
same place there in Tulsa.
Oh man, this is why I don't leave the house.
This is why we're in the same club. But, lots to get to today, lots to mock, evidently. Donald Trump had a big shindig where he brought out a couple of pickup trucks to show just how light he has lightened the load for America, and yet it didn't look like any lighter.
That's the metaphor, man. Is you have these two trucks, and they're like, oh, well, we have all of these regulations in the blue truck, and you can see it's weighing it down. And I'm like looking in, like, no, it's not. It looks about the same to me. So bless his heart. And then he, like, at the end of it, he was just like celebrating this idea that whoever came up with. He was just like, I don't know who came up with this idea, but this is great. And it was just like, yeah, if only it actually works. But really, that's what these regulations are. Is, the Republicans keep saying, oh, these regulations really weigh us down. They weigh us down. But then when actually you look at it, it doesn't really.
Yeah, like those regulations to keep workers safe with OSHA. We've had over 6,000 complaints of workers across the country reporting to OSHA that they're unsafe at work. And what has OSHA done? Nothing.
Or, the trucks themselves. That's the thing. Like, these were trucks that, 30, 40 years ago, if you hit them a certain way in the back, they'd blow up. So, he's got these big weights in these trucks. It's just like, oh, they can probably hold that weight because of regulations that require that they be able to do certain things.
Yeah.
Or, they have to actually be honest about, what the truck can do. They can't lie to people in all of these ads and stuff and say, oh, this truck will, fly you to heaven or whatever. And,
or hydroxychloroquine can cure COVID.
Yeah, and it turns out hydroxychloroquine doesn't, because there are regulations that require the FDA to actually sign off on stuff.
But I had a listener who sent me an email yesterday who was, quite angry that I didn't bring up that Barack Obama took it. Barack Obama took hydroxychloroquine back in 2010.
Oh, really? Interesting. To
for malaria.
Yeah, that's what the drug is for. It's fight malaria.
Evidently, he didn't bother to look that one up, but it is what it is. Also, I guess he went off on a rant, didn't Trump, about dishwashers. How did dishwashers come up in a regulatory conversation? How does that happen?
So he's been on this kick. Like, I've never seen somebody who is that willing to die on the hill of being against water conservation. Like, the man talks about toilet flushing and shower heads and now apparently dishwashers more than anybody I've ever seen. And it's like, dude, when was the last time you actually loaded a dishwasher?
Never.
Who wants to bet that has never happened?
Never happened.
I'll bet you he couldn't. The dude just leaves it all in the sink.
I'll bet no, put it in the sink. Are you kidding? Leave it right where it is. Somebody will come along and clean up after him. But here's the thing. I'll bet you he couldn't pick a dishwasher out if he had to.
And I guarantee he would know how to work it, even if he did. It's just. I know the last time he probably.
It was funny because he said that you keep pushing buttons over and over again. And look, I've had some old dishwashers. I don't remember pushing the button over and over again.
Yeah, even if you, like the super old one, I want to think the last time, because we finally had to, our dishwasher caught the house on fire, so we had to get a new one. But it was the kind where you press the buttons in, you had the one for the wash, and then you select what kind of dry you want, and it actually was a button that you press in, so not like these fancy digital ones like we have now. But it's just like, why would you don't need to push it over and over again, even with the ones that are 20 years old. Like, come on, dude. Like, how far are you outside of the norm? And then he made some weird asinine comment about the suburbs and how the suburbs are dying and people are fighting to get into the suburbs. And it's like, dude, people are fighting to afford the city. Everybody can afford the suburbs. That's the problem. Everybody wants to live downtown where all the action is. That's what people try and, aspire to is like, once the kids are grown, we can, get our condo in the city. But, yeah, people are fighting to get in the suburbs. Okay, whatever, Don.
Yeah, if he's pushing the button over and over again, he's doing something wrong. And then it brings to mind, do we really want him anywhere near the button if he's just going to keep pushing it?
And this goes back to the fact that he had to flush the toilet 10 or 15 times.
Is that the
Remember
gold
that
one? Is that the gold-plated one?
Yeah. Like, what in the hell are you eating that makes you have to flush the toilet 10 times? I lived in a house, I swear to you, like the house that I grew up in was built in 1929, and I'm pretty sure the sewage system was also built in 1929, and I never had to flush the toilet 10 times.
Well,
Come on, man.
Isn't his argument that, back in the good old days, back then, you didn't have to, but now because of all these regulations, you have to flush 10 times because it doesn't have enough water?
Which makes no sense. Nobody makes you have to have a low-flow toilet. And even if you do have a low-flow toilet, which we do with the 1929 house, it still flushes. You still only have to flush it once.
There you go.
Gravity. Gravity is your friend sometimes.
I saw, when I saw that, I go, are we going to bring back those crappy light bulbs too that kept burning out? Is that coming too?
He did bring about, he talked about the incandescent bulbs, and it's like, who wants to pay that electric bill? Like, the best thing about these LEDs is you can have, like, the colors behind me. This is because of LED. No incandescent bulb is going to do that for you.
No, we used to have to paint them.
Right? Remember whenever you used to, like, have to spray paint and to have a black light?
And then they'd heat up and it'd all melt off.
Yeah.
Ah, the good old days. Remember the good old days?
Back in my day.
Back in the old days. But you remember, since we brought up water and water conservation, did you see this story that the Secret Service evidently spent $25,000 on jet skis so the Trump family could go swimming? Is that true?
That is a true fact. And I want to say it was in August of last year. The Secret Service said that they really would only spend about $15,000, but it turns out they actually spent $25,000, more than $25,000, to buy a pair of jet skis, just two. And I actually went online and priced those things out. They got a bad deal.
Yeah, they got screwed. You can go on Craigslist, can pick them up for a couple grand.
And this is not because Trump wants to go swimming. This is because, the kids and the grandkids want to go swimming when they're at Mar-a-Lago. It's like, y'all got a pool. It's really big. I Googled the Mar-a-Lago pool. That thing is huge. And they want to swim out in the ocean, I guess, or in the canal or wherever the hell it is.
Jeez, oh, man. Yeah, so, it's like...
You and me. We get to pay for that.
Yeah, it's crazy. But here's the thing. Isn't he a billionaire? Shouldn't he be able to... Shouldn't Mar-a-Lago have a couple of those that they can use?
That's what I kept wondering. Like, shouldn't they have some that you could either rent, that the people who go to the club could rent, or and I looked online, I couldn't. The other problem is that at Bedminster in New Jersey, they ended up having some kind of golf cart contract with Trump's club so that they could rent the golf carts there, and it ended up being like $179,000 to rent the golf carts for a year. And so at that point, you're just like, okay, why don't we buy the golf carts? This is not like a thing where Trump is the only golfing president, right? Like every president golfs or pretends to.
Yeah.
So just buy a couple of them.
Buy a fleet.
Fine. Everybody else can walk.
There you go. Buy a fleet of them. I mean, you're right. I mean, why don't we have a whole fleet of them? You could have driven them there, and it's still been cheaper.
Yeah, you could have bought them in Jersey, like out in the middle of nowhere, and driven them to Bedminster, and spent less money on the gas for the golf cart than you would. For renting them from Trump's resort or club or whatever the hell it is.
It's just plain nuts, and it gets crazier every day. I mean, every day I see these stories coming out of some of these southern states where you just go, are these governors losing their mind? I mean, I look at the guy from Georgia, which you go, explain to me why it is that you feel the need to mandate that no county or city, has a mandate to wear masks or do something. I thought you were the party of less intrusive government and local government. I thought you were the party of local government. What the hell happened to that?
And that's the interesting thing. Like the mayor of Atlanta and the mayor of Savannah, I saw them talking today, and both of them said, "Yeah, no, we're not lifting our mask mandate." So get ready for that to be a Supreme Court lawsuit. I'm sure that's going to go and become an issue. The thing about all of these people who don't want to wear masks, it's completely fine. You don't have to wear a mask. Just stay home.
Yeah, and I think I've come up with it. It's just they've got really bad breath and they don't have good oral hygiene. I'm thinking that's probably it.
maybe that's it. We just need to give everybody, some wintergreen freshness that they can enjoy under their mask, or, try some floss and some Listerine. That'll do. I'm not being paid by anybody for that, by the way.
Maybe if there's another CARES Act, maybe we could put that in. But I understand there's not going to be another CARES Act unless Donald Trump gets his pound of flesh, which is, destroy Social Security.
Yeah, so he is totally fine with signing another stimulus because God knows everybody is broke, and now it's something like a third of Americans can't pay their mortgage or their rent. So we're about to have a housing crisis. We're going to have mortgage failures just like we did in 2008, and things are going to get bad if Congress doesn't hurry up and pass another stimulus that people can use to pay their mortgages or pay their rent. And we've been talking about this for months now.
Right.
And so Trump has decided that he's not signing anything if he doesn't get a payroll tax. Well, of course, the payroll tax, 30 million Americans are still out of work. So 30 million Americans aren't going to get any kind of payroll tax deduction. That's not going to give them anything. Not to mention, there's so much data out there about how it doesn't help the economy. So Trump wants to save the economy. He wants to choose the absolute worst way to try and do it. And he's going to screw over all of the people that are his voters or the people that need the money the most right now. I don't need a payroll tax deduction. I'm good. I still have my job. I'm working full time. I'm fine. Give it to somebody. Give it to these people who are unemployed right now. That's who needs it.
Well, they're going to take your payroll tax cut and give it to them, maybe. I don't know. But here's the thing. Here's the weird. No, you can't do that. Because here's the thing. Here's what's troubling to me is what we know from these payroll tax cuts, because they're not going to pay into Social Security. So if you're not paying that tax that's going into your Social Security, it's not going to be there because they're not subsidizing it like they did during the Obama years, because Obama did the almost the exact same thing. Only they allocated money to put into Social Security so that it wouldn't get harmed.
Exactly. And I think that's how you know that this is never going to pass. I mean, already the Democrats and the Republicans are kind of all over the place. Republicans want to get rid of any kind of liability lawsuits. So if your employer forces you to come into work and you get COVID, you can't sue them. So that's the thing that the Republicans are they're gonna die on that hill. And Democrats want I forgot what it was that they wanted. But it's something completely reasonable and boring. Bless their hearts. And Trump says he's not doing anything without a payroll tax. So it's not going to happen, and we're going to end up being screwed through November.
And I like the way you put that, something boring, where they could have, at this moment, they could be really, really pushing for something that would be helpful.
They could, but I mean, I get it. There's nothing that's going to happen. They're not going to get anything out of it because it's got to go through the Senate, and the Senate's Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell doesn't care. He didn't care if everybody died. And Donald Trump decided that he's going to, do whatever it takes to get his payroll tax. So it's just it's one thing after another where, why bother fighting, for something that everybody would benefit from, even Trump's voters, if Trump and the Republicans don't want to give it to him.
No, I mean, in a couple of days. I mean, we're only a couple of days away from the end of the month.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to change the closer we get to the election. Then all these Republicans are going to be like, we need a bill. Hurry. Let's pay people. Let's give people all the money in the world.
I think the middle of August, because you hit on it. About 20% of the people, about 20% of renters with children say they can't pay their rent. There's just no way. And about 45% say maybe, not really sure. Especially because at the end of this month, that $600 in additional unemployment benefit goes away. And that's what the Democrats are kind of pushing for, this extended unemployment, a little money for the states to help them, cover their costs and keep people on the payroll, keep things moving, because we could really end up in a major gridlock situation if there is. And I know the Republicans are saying there's going to be no more lockdown, no more shutdowns. We're steaming through. But if there is another one in the fall, because again, we're still not through the first wave, we're going to really need to figure this out.
You remember like a month ago when you were like, when do you think the second wave is going to hit? And I was like, I think it's going to hit whenever all the kids go back to school. Well, now all of these schools are like, yeah, we're not going to do this. So the largest school in the country, Los Angeles County, they're not going back to school. San Diego's not going back to school. I think Houston just said that they're going to do something. Oklahoma's talking about maybe starting late. The University of Oklahoma announced that they're not going to have classes after Thanksgiving, which makes no sense. It's like, okay, well, so everybody's going to get COVID from August through Thanksgiving, and then what? And then everybody's just done. But they're still, of course, charging housing for a full year because University of Oklahoma.
It's amazing.
I just got an earful about this tonight. Yeah. So
no, what's interesting to me is, you look at our society, and the sad reality is our society is heavily weighted on massive amounts of debt. Our corporate structure is heavily weighted on debt. And, you've got these hedge fund managers and these private equity funds who they buy up companies and they just saddle them with massive debt. And we're in this moment where, you no longer have the mom and pops who have their life savings in their business and they own everything. You no longer have this. We've got massively leveraged corporations. And if they're not able to pay their rent, we're going to have a massive commercial collapse. And the people who don't have jobs, we're going to see a massive real estate collapse that will make 2008 and 9 look well like no real problem at all.
Yeah, we are in for way bigger than 2008 was. I'm absolutely certain of it, just because this is it's not just the recession, which they said back in February is when the actual recession started. And that was not necessarily because of COVID, right? There's a lot of stuff going on way before that. A lot of problems that the Trump administration had been, creating since they got into office. So before COVID, things were bad. And now that we're in COVID, it's just making things absolutely worse. And I think that there are some people that are going back to work, and there are some places that are reopening, and it's like every time a city reopens and people go back to work, it's like, a month or two later, they have to shut down again. And that is just not good for the economy. That kind of instability, I don't really care about the market because I don't have any money in it, but the stability of the financials of the United States end up looking really bad. It makes it look like we don't know what we're doing because we have a president who doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, I saw Steve Schmidt, the former, I guess he's a former Republican, campaign person, strategist, and he was on MSNBC and he just went off on, we're the richest country in the world with the biggest military, all of this infrastructure, the best research institutions, the smartest people, and yet this is just devastating us, and we look like morons.
He said that he's seen online a bunch of people writing in chalk in the UK and taking a picture of it that says stuff like, please do not leave your American unattended, or make sure they're always with an adult. And it's just like, oh my God. Like, I don't want people to look at me and say, because my president is the world's biggest idiot, that somehow I'm the biggest idiot. So, speaking of which, though, the great island of Barbados is now inviting people who can work online from anywhere a 1-year visa if you want to move there. So I'm looking into that one.
There you go. Now, do you have to be screened before you get in? Do you have to be quarantined for a couple of weeks before they let you in, or they just open the doors to anybody?
That's what I wonder. But COVID doesn't spread in the ocean, so I'm just happy if I can quarantine, and still get in the water. I'm good.
Get yourself one of those little floaties and out there. Right? Nothing wrong with that.
The arm floaties. Put the arm floaties on and just be like.
There you go. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with our good friend Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, their website. Make sure you want to check out the work that they do. Fabulous, fabulous stuff. I wanted to get your thoughts on this Kaylee McEnany. Is that how it's said? You know, she had probably the dumbest statement that I've heard in a very long time. That science shouldn't stand in the way of reopening schools because heaven forbid we want kids to actually learn anything while we're forcing them back into the schools where they're probably going to get sick. But evidently she got into a back and forth with the mayor of Chicago. What's that about?
Yeah, it was so weird. Like, this is one of those things where it's like the campaign is asking the White House to go out and say random things so that they have something to, you know, gin up some kind of culture war with. And for some reason, for the longest time, Trump has been after Chicago. And I get it. There are a lot of brown people there, and Trump doesn't like brown people. So, of course, he's going to go after them. And the mayor is a black woman, so of course he's seriously threatened by black women.
There's a twofer, both woman and black. Yep.
Right.
Twofer.
Exactly. So Mayor Lightfoot, I guess Kylie made some comment about how Chicago needs to reach out to the federal government and turn over all of her responsibilities to them so that they can come in and clean up Chicago. And bless her heart, Mayor Lightfoot called Kylie McEnany a Karen, which is actually kind of on the nose because you remember whenever Kylie said she wasn't going to wear a mask in Oklahoma, you know, so that was the Karen mask rant, and then, you know, going off about people of color in Chicago. I do not understand what it is with Trump in Chicago. Chicago is not the most dangerous city in the country. There are actually lists, people who compile lists of all of the, you know, the dangerous places, the safe places, and Chicago doesn't even make it in the top 10.
Really? See, because all the news we hear about are all the murders and all of the shootings and all the stuff that go on. So where is the most dangerous place in the world?
Baltimore. Anchorage, Alaska, if you talk about per capita, because there are not very many people there, and the crime in Anchorage, Alaska is apparently huge. So Anchorage, Alaska, Albuquerque, New Mexico is really bad. I think Memphis, Tennessee was one of the other ones. But yeah, I mean, there's one of them was in Washington, but it's not Seattle. It's another city. But it's just like, you know, all of these cities that you really wouldn't expect.
Right.
And they're in red states and blue states. They're kind of all over the place. And it really is, I think it's about just the amount of news that people see about a specific city. And I don't get why Chicago has become like this poor bastardized child of the United States that somehow, you know, whatever they do, it's wrong and evil and terrible.
Because MS-13 is lurking around every corner.
It's because they're brown people, and Trump is a racist.
What happened to Antifa?
I mean, really.
I thought Antifa was public enemy number one. Now we're back to MS-13?
Yeah, now we're back to MS-13. The Attorney General has decided that he's going to charge them with terrorism. I don't know how he's going to find them. I mean, that's been the problem, right, for the last 30 years, or not 30 years, but like the last several years, is that they couldn't find MS-13. So if they can find the people, I guess then they could charge them with terrorism. But it's just sort of like, you know,
so
firing
how
the
is it
chef
that
on the Titanic.
How is it that they're around every corner, but we can't find them?
Exactly, right? Trump thinks that they're everywhere, and yet the FBI can't seem to put their finger on them.
How very bizarre. And finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Washington football team. Evidently, they're going to change the name, perhaps. But also, they've got kind of a little scandal going on.
Yeah, they have a serious problem. 15 women came out and said that they were sexually harassed by executives in the hierarchy of the business side of the football team. And we're not talking cheerleaders. We're talking like marketing people and staff, people who work in the business office. And it's everything from, you know, vice presidents grabbing their behind during, you know, games and, you know, calling all of these women stupid. And it got to be so bad that they actually had like a little therapy group in the women's room where everybody would go every day to cry and talk about how horrible their job was. And it's just, I mean, if you're working for an NFL team, chances are you're probably pretty marketable as a person, so you could probably find something else. If somebody makes me cry at work, I'm gone. You know, like,
or they're getting kicked in the you know what. I mean,
right? Yeah, I mean, I would get fired because
Yeah. But here again, this is one of these moments where I go, as a union guy, this is why you form unions. This is the reason that you all come together. If you're going to the bathroom to cry, maybe hand out union cards, and then we sue, we file grievances, we do all of that stuff and make things transparent. Why is it? And this is one of these weird moments. And look, this is an old white guy who's never been harassed, not understanding why women put up with it. Why?
I don't get it either. I mean, this is look at the players. The players have a union because it turns out they were getting paid really terrible wages and destroying their bodies, and needed some money for after they're finished with the game. Why are the cheerleaders not unionized? Right? They get paid terrible wages.
Yeah.
And have had to fight for reasonable living wages, and so it's just like I don't understand why people don't fight for this kind of stuff. You know, at the Raw Story, we are unionized.
There you go. That's what I love about you guys. Any thoughts on the name? You know, I'm kind of partial to the kickbacks because it is DC. But any thoughts?
The Washington lobbyists.
Probably not bad.
The Washington corruptors.
The corruptors. I like that.
Right? I mean, they've got all of those president statues, so it could just be the Washington president, and they could borrow them from the Nationals. You know, they could, they could name it after all kinds of stuff. They could, the Jeffersons, they could name it after, you know, the Washington Potomac. I don't know. They can come up with all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, well,
the Washington traffic jams.
We'll see what they come up with. Traffic jams. There you go. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Great stuff as always.
Have an awesome weekend. Be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at Raw Story. Rawstory.com is the website. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
These investments are a win-win-win for this country.
Joe Biden unveils sweeping climate action plan to create jobs, jumpstart the economy, and solve climate change.
Oh, is that all?
I've been wanting to do this from day one.
While Trump officially rolls back yet another benchmark environmental law. Plus, new analysis shows extraordinary increase in U.S. coastal flooding.
Naturally. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They want to mandate net zero carbon emissions for homes, offices, and all new buildings by 2030. That basically means no windows, no nothing.
No, it doesn't, Mr. President. This is your Green News Report.
It's very hard to do. I tell people when they want to go into some of these buildings, how are your eyes? Because they won't be good in 5 years.
Okay, Desi Doyen, is it my imagination or has the President of the United States gone a little bit bonkers there?
I don't think it's your imagination at all. And I will say that this week really underscores the stark contrasts between President Trump and the Republicans' agenda to ignore climate change and increase pollution versus Joe Biden and the Democrats' plan to clean up pollution and solve the climate crisis while creating jobs.
There's an idea.
But first, new data from NOAA shows a a, quote, extraordinary rise in coastal flooding in the United States. The frequency of flooding in some coastal cities is now 5 times higher than it was in the year 2000, damaging homes, drinking water supplies, and coastal infrastructure. And because the rate of sea level rise is itself accelerating, NOAA projects that by 2030, just 10 years from now, the frequency of high tide flooding on sunny days will double or triple. And by 2050, within the lifetime of a 30-year mortgage signed today, high tide flooding could be 5 to 15 times more frequent. The average coastal community could see flooding at high tide between 25 to 75 days a year. That's more than 3 months' worth of sunny day flooding over a year.
So when you say sunny day flooding, you mean days that we have floods even though we don't have storms, we don't have rain. This is just the high tide coming in and getting higher.
Yep. In a different report, the Government Accountability Office this week found that the Trump administration is deeply understating the cost of climate change when it justifies its rollbacks of environmental and public health standards, like, for example, the costs of rising sea levels driven by man-made climate change.
So even the GAO agrees that Trump is getting this wrong.
Yep. On Wednesday, the Trump administration formally completed its rollback of a bedrock conservation law, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970, in order to speed up infrastructure projects like pipelines and roads. The rollback eliminates requirements to consider a project's long-term impacts, like climate change and pollution, and effectively blocks local communities' rights to review such projects and have a say in what gets built in their backyards.
And when Donald Trump said about that,
I've been wanting to do this from day one.
He's wanted to do this from day one because whenever he wants to build something, these are the regulations that he has to deal with. So this is meant to make his life better, I guess.
Yep. In sharp contrast, presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden on Tuesday unveiled a sweeping, comprehensive new proposal to solve both the economic crisis brought on by the global pandemic and the climate crisis. Biden's plan would fund $2 trillion over 4 years to create jobs in upgrading America's energy and transportation infrastructure and manufacturing, targeting 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035 and net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050, with a focus on environmental justice. Other provisions, among many, include building a national electric vehicle charging network, energy efficiency building retrofits, cleaning up legacy pollution and abandoned oil wells, building high-speed rail, and exporting U.S.-manufactured clean energy technology to the rest of the world. All of it locked in so it can't be undone by a future president. Biden framed Trump's climate science denial as costing America both money and jobs.
When Donald Trump thinks about climate change, the only word he can muster is hoax. When I think about climate change, the word I think of is jobs.
Biden called climate action a scientific and economic imperative and called the twin crises of the coronavirus pandemic and climate change an opportunity.
Climate change is a challenge that's going to define our American future. I know meeting the challenge will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to jolt new life into our economy, strengthen our global leadership, protect our planet for future generations.
It's a sweeping, progressive plan. Just don't call it the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Because Fox is already freaking out about it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Florida's an absolute mess. Today they recorded the highest single-day death toll since the pandemic began. 156 people died in the past 24 hours. Their emergency operations center. These are the supposedly the people who are on the ground trying to manage the response around the clock. These are the folks who are the brain trust of trying to figure out how to stop this. Well, evidently today on Twitter, they announced that 12 of their workers at this emergency operations center have tested positive, and that they are closing down operation until Monday till they sort things out. That's not good. And also, hey, a third of the children that have been tested for COVID-19 have tested positive in Broward, Dade, Hillsborough, and Palm Beach County. And yet we still want to send kids back to school. Very, very bizarre and insane. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad maybe things are, not just in Florida, but across the country, I've asked our good friend Dr. Kelly Sennholz to come talk with us and share some thoughts on the news of the day. Kelly, thanks for taking time for us.
You're very welcome.
So, I'm looking at Florida and going, no, Florida's really, really screwed up, especially the number that of the kids tested. A third of the people tested have been kids under 18. It's crazy that just completely out of hand.
I think one of the problems in Florida is, number one, they lie about what's happening constantly. It appears the Republican response to the virus is to just lie and hide and circumvent. And I believe the problem in Florida is so much worse than we even know. It's a disaster going on, and everybody just keeps walking around like nothing's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's this really bizarre kind of world, and as you said, the numbers coming out of there, you really, I don't know if you can trust anything at this point. Now we find out the Trump administration is not going to allow hospitals to respond. I guess that happened yesterday. Not going to be able to report to the CDC. There was a big, outrage, like from me. Now they're going to report something. I mean, they're just completely, destroying any infrastructure that we would have any faith in.
Well, here's a little bit of news on that, too. They're trying to control the reporting, which obviously means they're trying to lie about the problem.
Right.
But there's a drug we know called remdesivir, which is the drug given to help shorten the length of disease. Very important part of the arsenal to fight this and help keep people alive. I started getting messages 2 days ago from doctors saying, oh my gosh, we're not able to get it. Do you know anything? I tracked it down, and apparently either there's a shortage of it, which number one is a disaster, or they're limiting the sale of remdesivir to some hospitals if they don't give certain statistics. And I'm not exactly clear what the problem is, but I do know there's a shortage. And as the numbers begin to rise, if we're having a shortage right now, that is going to be bad.
Yeah. And look, it wasn't cheap either. I mean, I think for a treatment, the report I saw was like $3,500. It was like $500 a pill.
Right.
And the thing that gets me is, look, I know other pills and I know other drugs are really expensive, but we spent millions of dollars on research and development. We were handing out money, and then to have them sell it back to us at that, it just seems like a major slap in the face, especially in this moment of crisis.
You were talking earlier about how it's so odd how people don't fight for their own good. And here's another example where over the years, the corporations, the big corporations have taken control, putting their tentacles into our universities, and they're even directing which research gets done. For instance, a company might say, hey, we need to figure out this part of a molecule, and so let's get some PhD students to work on this. So basically, they're getting free research from the universities and massive amounts of valuable things from that we pay for, the students pay for, we pay for it, and then they turn around and charge a massive profit on it. They're one of the most profitable sectors in our economy, and we're paying it. It's basically coming right out of our pocket.
I mean, but this is how it usually works out. I mean, we take public dollars, we hand it to private corporations, and they privatize the profits.
Yep, that's exactly what we really have got to get a grip on each example of this and work to put a stop to it. It's absolutely out of control.
I had a doctor who he emailed me, a doctor from Maryland, and I'm not going to say his name, but he basically took me to task for being wrong on virtually every front. In talking about this, saying that we don't need to use masks. There's no research that says that this is going to help, and he just went on to this whole. And he may be a doctor, he may not be, I don't know. But he said that one of the things or a couple of the things that caught me, and I wanted to ask you about. He said, we're not in a second wave. This isn't a mutated virus. That this is a progression of the same virus. This is that virus growing. And I've heard the mutated virus. This is a new strain. It's growing. Is that accurate?
Well, number one, there is a mutation. There's two different mutations that are predominant in the United States right now. Here's the issue, though. Both of them cause similar disease, similar severity and length of disease, similar death rates. So in a way, at this time, that's a bit of a moot point. However, the fact that we're allowing the virus to be so predominant in our country is giving the virus a foothold. It's giving it an opportunity or a mistake, a genetic mistake could happen that could cause a real disaster. It could become very much more virulent. It could become very, I'm not saying this will happen, but it's irresponsible for our nation with all the resources we have to be allowing this to happen. This is not a mistake. It's not an inevitability. It's not something we can't avoid. This is not a natural disaster. This is a man-made disaster.
Right.
And we know who the Orange Man is.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
This does not need to be happening.
No, and I agree. And I've had a number of people say that we shouldn't be here. We should have already handled this, months ago. We should have done, X, Y, and Z, but we haven't. But the thing is, we are the wealthiest country in the world. We've got the best research universities in the country. We've got all of these advantages, and yet we're the ones taking it on the chin because our political system is so badly broken. And when someone like Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, says science shouldn't be used to base opening the schools, my head was about to explode. And I go, why would that person be anywhere near a microphone, let alone in the job she's in? And then I remember, oh yeah, because that's what Donald Trump said.
I get up every day and I wonder why. I kind of have passed a point. He is killing us. And let me give you a couple of numbers. So experts at the University of Washington said that by November 1st, we will have 250,000 dead. That is an unheard of death rate. If you include, now poverty is actually a very big predictor of health problems and death.
Right.
We're about, you guys touched on it earlier today, we're about to spin rapidly into an economic crisis that we've really never seen. So we have deaths that are going to be occurring from poverty. We have deaths that are occurring from the virus. It's not inconceivable that by next spring we'll have 1 million people dead. And I just want to put this into perspective for people. That's 1 in 300 people that are now alive in the United States. Just
right.
A little bit under 1 in 300 people. That's an astounding number of deaths. All of it caused by the action of one man. So this is I keep saying this is like a Pol Pot type situation. We don't have guns, we don't have bombs, so it's hard for people to get a grip that we're being murdered basically with policy, and it's of a level. If 1 million people die by the spring, that's twice the rate of the deaths in Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot.
Wow. I mean, it's,
yeah.
I have a listener who's
people have a hard time understanding how a purposeful policy that kills people is just as deadly, just as dangerous as a bomb. We went insane. Over 3,000 people dead in the towers.
Right.
And we're having that many dead every few days now. And people are just numb. They don't know what to do. It's astounding to watch a population be taken down with policy. It's just hard to watch,
or a lack thereof. I have a listener who's a PhD, a brilliant guy. He sent me his models on how he sees the numbers growing exponentially, and he's saying by September expect 20,000 people to die a day. And I'm going 20,000 a day. I mean, we see 156 in Florida today and go, wow, that's a lot. You start seeing as a country, we're up in the 20,000 range. We easily get to where 1 million, like you're talking about.
It's not just the deaths. I mean, I just want to make this point. When you look statistically at a situation, there's randomness to it. There's different things you look at. Every single thing that the Republicans have done increases deaths and increases virus load. So it is statistically impossible for this to all have been mere incompetence. It's it never happens that way. That's not like by accident they should have done something that helped. But it's clear, and look at the remdesivir. The only drug we have that can help is suddenly mysteriously not showing up at the hospitals.
So I mean, so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that this is much more nefarious than just plain being incompetent and inept and self-centered. You're thinking, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're thinking that this was something that was done on purpose?
I believe that he is definitely. I have my opinions about why he's doing this, but there's no doubt that in this situation, there's no way he could have always chosen the thing that increases the virus. To not have PPE at this stage of the game is a purposeful choice.
Right.
You could say in March that it was just ineptness, he wasn't ready, he gave it away, whatever, you could say that in March and maybe even April. But by May, there should have been a concerted effort and a focus and a governmental plan to make sure we have enough PPE. By June, it was clear this is absolutely, there's a purposeful lack of action on that. And now we're in July, and we're having an explosion of cases again, and we already did not have enough PPE. Some hospitals were getting to the point where they had enough, but many hospitals were still struggling, still having to wear masks for days on end, not having the adequate amount of PPE. And now we're headed into an uphill climb of cases that's going to absolutely devastate our store of PPE. So even the simplest things, the very simplest things that could be done to make this better, they not only haven't been done, but there's purposeful action to not do them. In the case of PPE, it was the choice, the adamant choice, to not enact laws that would cause companies to be able to make them. That was a choice. It didn't just happen. We're not just suffering from the attack of a virus and how terrible it is. This is actually purposeful decisions on the part of our acting government.
It's incredible to me.
It's hard to take in. I get it.
It is, but it's just one of these things where, we're in this world where I don't doubt it. I don't doubt his self-centeredness. I don't doubt his narcissism. I don't doubt, all of the horrible things that we've heard and talked and thought about this guy being absolutely the God's honest truth and putting us in this position where we're completely unsafe. I mean, and now they're pushing to force our kids to go back to school, which, both my wife and I agree, we're not sending our kids to school. But this doctor who sent me the email, and this is the last thing I wanted to ask you about. He was talking about, he was telling me that, the kids, while they do get infected at much higher rates, and because I had made the statement that, you're going to send them into the place where if one kid gets head lice, then they all get it. You're going to send them in with a pandemic. He said, well, yeah, they'll all get it, but they're much more resilient than adults, that their immune systems are better, and that they'll figure this out. He said that isolation and quarantine is actually worse for them than going to school and getting sick.
We all agree that isolation and quarantine is not good for kids. My heart breaks when I think about kids that are in abusive homes and trapped there now. Nobody disagrees with that. We all want children to go back to school. However, just like the meatpacking plants and other corporations have become nidus for the virus because people come together and they're near each other and they're talking and touching around each other, it's inevitable that a case will come in and it will get spread there. The same with the school. So if the children get it at a much higher rate and they're around 50 or 80 adults, those adults will get it. They will become ill. We will have to close the schools back down immediately, which is going to be more disruptive to everybody than making a workable plan to begin with. And then those adults who will have already spread it into the community. In other words, the schools are the heart of our community. In every town I'm in, it's the school and the hospital. This is where everybody comes. It's a touch point. So the school is going to become an infection zone for every community in this country. This is where I'm getting to the purposeful part of this.
Right.
He's been told this. This is not news to him. People have said this to him, and if they didn't, they're incompetent.
Yeah, he just doesn't care.
I think it's more than that. He is choosing the thing which will increase the virus at every turn, and this is, we're already on an upturn. By the end of the summer, it's going to be on fire. And if schools try to open under those circumstances, their entire towns are going to become infected. There's no doubt about that. Yes, I get it. I want kids to go back to school. And yes, I get it. They get the virus and you don't even know they have it frequently. But here's the thing. Not all of them. Some of them will die.
Yeah.
Some of the kids will die. And so if you have a school of 2,000 kids, let's say 25 of them will die. And the question I ask people is, which kid? Would it be your kid or your neighbor's kid? Which kid would it be okay that they passed away, or their grandparents or their parents or their uncles, their cousins? Which people in your community would it be okay to be not as careful and not as thoughtful about the process and let them die?
No,
that's really what this boils down to.
No, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you. Dr. Sennholz, I appreciate you taking time, sharing your expertise and your thoughts. Lots to think about.
Yep. Thanks so much.
Good stuff, as always. Our good friend, Dr. Kelly Sennholz. Again, make sure you check out the work that she's doing with the masksnow.org group. Fantastic stuff. Quick break, right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So real quick before we have to wrap up, evidently the Vatican today announced that bishops, they told all their bishops across the world that in any case that has the clergy involved in any sex crimes or anything, that they are to report it to the police immediately. They are without question to report it to the police. And I go, shouldn't they have been doing that? I don't know, from the beginning? Wasn't that what they should have been doing all along? And maybe had they done that, maybe we wouldn't have the kind of problems that they've got. Although the good thing is if there's no school in the fall, we won't have this to worry about, will we? Just again, one of these weird things. Now, understand, I'm sure the Catholic schools, the religious schools, I am sure that they will be open in the fall. So the question I have for you, would you send your kids to school this fall? Are you feeling confident that they'll make it through? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.